Hi, everybody.
You all know me. I've been here a while.
So this is our attempt to sort of make a more focused podcast. We wanted to the old ones are very unfocused, they're a bit rambling, and a lot of the time they were just talking about random things. And we sort of decided that it would be best to have a more quest-focused podcast for the questing community. Now, first off, it seems Pally, why don't you give a quick introduction of who you are and what quest you're on and so on?
Who I am and what quests I run. God, how long have you got? Right, so I'm Pally. Some of you may or may not have heard of me from such memes as that character gen from Paladin of Joy, which is where I draw my name from. First quest I ever ran, longest quest I ever ran, and notorious for its character generation. I've been questing on TG and later on Anonkun for coming up to 3 years now, and I've run, or am running, a total of about sort of 9 quests at any given time, covering a wide variety of different genres.
All right. And then Spuds, you've recently started running a quest, so why don't you introduce that?
I've started running my quests. I've run one thread. It was short. I didn't do everything I wanted to do in it. It was because it was late. I was basically collapsing because I had had a long day, but I still ran it because you have to. If you set a time, you run. It's even possible.
Yeah.
So I run Dogs of War. It's it's Isekai played completely straight because I'm a terrible person. So and I don't like people having contempt for whatever they're writing. You should respect what you write,
Yeah.
And I think even parodies should, to some extent, have respect for whatever they're parodying. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
pretty
completely
excited
fair
to run
enough.
again.
So
It
since you're a new
worked.
GM, I want to know, how are
I
you
actually
adjusting to it? Like,
I
how
got
was your
words
first
down on
session? You said
paper,
it
and
went
that's
a
what's
bit iffy, but
important
how are
because
you dealing with sort of like the
it was a
stress? Are
lot
you
easier
excited to
to
run
do
again?
that under the time constraints that having a responsibility to people who are like actively waiting for whatever you're writing, that drives you forward a bit. It means that you can't procrastinate, and having consistent set times helps with that as well.
All right. Well, that's our introduction. And just to cap things off, if you don't know me, I'm MZion. I run uh, some quests that will probably get me arrested in the future on Aiken. So, moving on to that. So, Aiken's recently been a bit shaky, what with servers going down and up, etc., etc. Have either of you two been affected by it?
Not directly. Last time I had problems with this Acon servers was a couple of months ago, where it just suddenly crashed in the middle of a session. Other than that, it hasn't affected me that much.
I tried to run yesterday and it wouldn't let me post chapters.
Oof, that's rough. You're gonna try again though? Have another session soon?
Yeah, no, I was already. I'm going to run on Sundays no matter what. So that's the rule I've set for myself. And then I might or might not have sessions in the middle of the week, but I'll always run Sunday.
All right. So, Anonkun is maybe sort of going through a rebranding. Cass originally, well, a few years ago, Cass wanted to put on Fiction.live as a replacement name to make it more mainstream. What do you guys think of Anonkun turning into Fiction.live?
Well, a rebranding is one thing, but is it actually going to change anything? Because maybe he wants to turn this into essentially a fanfiction.net, which obviously would have a wider audience than an XTG crowd. But just changing the name of a website doesn't actually change who uses it.
Yeah, that's totally right.
He's stuck with us now. I don't think there's any way he can really. I mean, the crowd he wants. I don't think he wants to actually get rid of Smut. And even if he tried to, even if he got rid of smut entirely, most of the community would be would probably still be invested enough that they wouldn't leave.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem though is I do think it really harms the chances the site has for advertising. Like, I know pornographic things get really basically shitty ads, which is a real shame, because I do think, like, I wouldn't be adverse to Akon having ads or whatever to help pay for server costs, because obviously he might need some help with server costs. But anyway, that's enough about the general state of Anonkun. One of our main sections for today is we're going to be chatting to you, Pally, and we're going to be chatting about your quests in general. This is basically your chance to sell yourself to the community at large.
Oh dear.
Well, I'm a big fan of quite a few of your quests, so I was thinking of maybe, why don't we start with your first one, Paladin of Avalon? Why don't you tell us? To start with, it's really infamous for that huge, meaty, like, character generation that sort of became a joke in the QTG. So, what are your thoughts on your first quest?
What are my thoughts on my first quest, which is Paladin of Joy, not Paladin of Avalon?
God damn it, my mistake. Sorry.
The Russians are everywhere.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm secretly a Russian in disguise. Right, yeah. What are my thoughts on? Let's start with the character gen, of course. Well, coming from a pen and paper background, making a character always was the first part of the game, and it was a part of the game that I very much loved. I have no problem making complicated characters or really weird characters. I like rules. I like building characters. I'd only read a few quests at that point. Some of them had character generation in them, some didn't. Those that did seem to sort of spread the character generation out quite a lot over the first thread. And my general thought was, let's get it all done and out of the way, and then we can actually get on to actually playing the quest. So that's why I did all that. Obviously, it has become infamous in that it was, I've heard all sorts about that character gen and what it means about me as a person. Was it a joke? Was it serious? Is Pally really that autistic? So on and so forth. But it worked out in the end, so lucky me.
So
I haven't actually checked it out. How extreme was it? Like, were there like 20 questions? Or
if only.
there were 20 questions, like, that you had to answer. Okay, that's quite excessive. Yeah, maybe I should check it out one day.
It started on TG, and back in the old times when we had quest thread generals on TG, people, like, when the first threads came, people looked at it and just said, "Is this a joke?" Because most people didn't think a Kieran would be able to handle doing all that sort of like crunch, basically. The sort of meat of the quest. It's very rigid in the way it emulates the sort of D&D systems. So how did you deal with, like, the constant system in your quest? Pally, did it just become natural over time? Was it a burden sort of going back and checking mechanics? Or did you, like, have some assistance?
Well, I did have some assistance. Well, it started as called Character Gen Anon, later became Autism Anon, because he very kindly, at the end of every thread, would basically error check all of my pastes and just say, "Hang on, you've spelt this here, or this is missing, or these numbers haven't been written up properly," which got a little bit annoying at times, but was all to the benefit of it in the end. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the paste, the character sheets at the moment, they are pages and pages long. But at the start of the quest, it was very, very simple. There was only a few modifiers to keep track of, and there was only a few sort of abilities that the character had. So it started off simple and grew over time.
That's fine.
I have a question related to that. Have you ever actually either abandoned or finished a quest? Because as far as I can tell, I can't really see if it's ever happened.
I haven't abandoned any quests. Sometimes I have had long times between running quests, as I tend to sort of run them on a 3-month cycle and then put them down for 3 months and then start them up again. I have actually brought Paladin of Joy and Psychic Rebel quest to a conclusion, maybe not the conclusion that I wanted to. There was plenty of other plot threads I could have followed along, but at the end of the day, I felt that they'd had their time in the sun and I was ready to move on to other things. So I brought them both to an end for their stories.
Speaking of moving things, originally, if I'm not mistaken, those two quests were started on TG, and now you've sort of moved over to Anonkun. So somebody who's had quite a lot of experience in both of the, major formats, aside from forum questing, what do you like about the Akon format, and what do you dislike about it compared to the TG format, or QST now?
What do I like about the Akon format? Well, first of all, you do actually get a lot more players on Akon than you do in QST, and to a degree also TG. Maybe that's just my personal experience, but that's what I've seen. I also very much like the chat feature, as you did sometimes get chatter in between updates on TG, but it's a lot rarer because obviously they're aware that everything they say, every post sort of counts against the limit. And since me and some of the QMs tend to sort of keep running a session until you sort of the thread was ready to drop off the board, and that means every single comment that somebody makes the session maybe a little bit shorter. Whereas obviously you don't have that issue on Akon, that people can just sort of have a general chat about the quest whilst you're waiting for the next update. So I really like that because it lets me know that players are in fact interested in the quest, that they like talking about the quest, and that part of Anonkun, it just sort of helps keep yourself interested as a QM. Where is TG and QST better than Akon? They have less tendency to want to derail a quest into smut. Is one definite thing I would say that maybe Anonkun needs to get a little bit better at, that if it's not primarily a smut quest, do we really need to go in that direction?
Yeah, that's a big problem with a lot of questers. I really think that sort of Akon being pigeonholed into smut is a problem at times. This is sort of hypocritical considering I run like a million smut quests, but I can see it being a bit of a problem further down the line.
I have a question. Do you think that's more because of a problem with the community, or do you think that's a consequence of the site's format, that maybe people are less invested in stories because of how everything is structured?
Sorry, but just to clarify, you're saying that the interest in smut is just part of Anonkun's community or part of the setup? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking if the tendency to derail rather than the interest in the smut itself is because of lower investment, or just that the community wants their fucking smut. Like, is it because of the format or because of the community is my question. Yes,
I think that it's a big part of it might be because it's Akon over the past couple of years has gotten like quite a bit bigger than before, and one of the things I do like about it is you can basically just go on the live page and you can see all sorts of quests. You're spoiled for choice. If you're not super picky about what kind of quests you love, then it's like, you can just pick one from the live page. It doesn't even have to be from the live page, it could just be getting updated. And you can just choose whatever you want. And like, granted, people do like getting their dick wet. It's something that everyone has to like admit. But I think because people have all these quests and because there is so much smut, when they see a new quest, it's like, okay, yeah, the writing's good, etc., etc. But I've also got this quest that also writes good, but it has smut. So are you going to sort of compete with that, or are you just going to have an inferior product? Like, that's how I think the sort of community on Akon deals with it. I'm not sure if you guys agree or not.
well, I mean, some people are not going to want smut in their quest.
Yeah, of course.
So you can carve out a niche in that, if nothing else.
Yeah. Well, some quests started with smut and went away. Like Promises of Power is a big one that sort of stepped away from smut. Like, you don't.
I also it used to happen that it was supposed to be smut, but it ended up not being it in the end, like Familiar Quest back in the day. I remember that. Promises of Power is different because from what I have spoken to Contrived, he never expected that his quest would be so popular, so he made it smart to get players basically. But then he got too many players, and he never really wanted to write smart to begin with, so he removed it again.
Even still, the quest is still very successful, so it does show that you can run a successful non-smart quest on Anonkun, which is always good. So Pally, like, you run a lot of quests, and some QMs, they think of quests sort of like kids, and we all know you're never supposed to choose which kid is your favorite. But which quest is your favorite, Pally?
The one I last ran. The reason that I run so many quests, other than my short attention span and like many QMs, suffering from the problem that I have too many ideas and not enough time. So my quest, I can't pick a favorite. It's more about what mood am I in. I try and stick to a schedule so that players can obviously have some sort of expectation, some sort of structure of what's coming next. But honestly, at any given time when I sit down and think I'm going to run a quest today, it could be I'm in the mood for a Star Wars quest, or I'm in the mood for an action quest, or I'm in the mood for a bit of intrigue and a bit of Nightbane, or one of my other quests, and different characters and different kind of storylines, and what are we doing in the quest today? Are we exploring? Are we adventuring? Are we having a fight? Or are we writing a smut scene? So part of the reason I have so many quests is not, I've got 9 kids or whatever, and one of them's my favorite. It's more a case of, I've got 9 kids, and today I want to play with this one.
All right.
If you have a favorite, and you don't have a favorite, but is there a quest you like less than the others that you kind of don't want to continue, but you feel duty bound to?
No. I mean, part of the reason that I did end up sort of ending Paladin of Joy and Psychic Rebel Quest was that those two were starting to move in that direction where I was keeping running them because I've been running them for so long, and I had lots of plot lines I wanted to keep on doing, and players were obviously enjoying themselves. But when it was getting to the point when it was no fun for me, I decided that, not no fun, but should we say less fun, then it was a case of, right, I really need to, bring these to some kind of conclusion before it becomes the point where I actually hate running the quests. And a little bit of a tangent, I ran one session of Psychic Rebel on QST, and it's not entirely the board's fault. It's partly my fault for the way that I ran that particular session. But at the end of it, I actually was very much considering simply dropping that quest and never going back to it. So I didn't want to be in that situation when I later on, so I brought them to a kind of a conclusion.
All right. One thing we do have actually is we've got a question from a Caterpillar. So, Pally, why is it that only 2 of your quests have smut? Is it just to keep things all separated? So sometimes when you feel like in a smut mood, there's a smut quest you can run, or is there an ulterior motive behind only having 2 with smut?
Well, I would say it's only got 2 with smut. A lot of my quests have had the occasional smut scene. Wild World is one where it's my first Akon quest, so that was a little bit more smut heavy than I normally ran. And one of them, Keeper of the Veil, is essentially my designated smut quest. So yeah, it's a little bit of compartmentalization, because obviously quite happy to write smut scenes, don't want them to take over existing quests. So although it was an option in some of my quests that there will be the occasional smut scene, for when me and my players obviously were wanting a smut before plot, that's when I decided to have a designated quest simply for that.
All right. One other question, which is just from me to you. So when I run, I have a lot of players, and the players are very sort of distanced from all of the quests. Like, there are some of my players that only follow, for example, Fad Quest, because for some reason they like Isekai. There are some players that only follow another quest, etc., etc. Is that the case for you, or do you feel like you have a sort of consistent like consistent player base that follows you along the majority of your quests?
Bit of a very complicated Venn diagram. I have some core players that seem to follow me wherever I go, and thank you for that. And I know some of their names. But there are some people that will only play in, my Psychic Rebel quest. There are some that will only follow my Star Wars quest because they're huge Star Wars fans, not because they like me in particular. My designated smut quest tends to draw in quite a few readers and has the most likes out of any of my quests by far. So it's a bit of a case that there is quite a lot of overlap between all my quests. You will a lot of the time see discussion of one quest in another quest's chat, and we sometimes go off the rails a little bit on that. But you also see some people popping in saying, "Hang on, what are you guys talking about?" And they're like, "Oh, it's one of Pally's other quests," and they're like, "Oh, I don't follow that one." So bit of both.
Okay. You got any other questions, Spuds?
Not really. I think I've asked the questions which I wanted to have answered.
Well, then I just have a few more. So, Pally, you so I know you definitely write on Anonkun, but how often do you read other quests on Anonkun, and what are some of your sort of standout favorites?
I wish I had more time to read quests on Anonkun, simply because the only time I have time to read quests is occasionally commuting to and from work, and my phone connection is a little bit unreliable. So a lot of the time, I might sort of archive binge on a quest, or I might sort of follow it for a session or two and drop it if I don't really have the time. What are my standout ones that I sort of follow regularly on Anonkun? To be honest, I simply don't have time to follow any quests on Anonkun or on QST with any regularity. A lot earlier in my questing career, such as it is, I was reading quests such as Peter Parker quest on TG, and also Hellborn. What's the name of the one that Damp used to run? Knight Apprentice quest.
The one
really
with
love.
like the brown girl, whatever, knight, and nobody could figure out what exactly the knight was, I think.
Exactly that one. So unfortunately, I can't really point to any sort of Anonkun quest that I follow regularly. I pop into quite a few of them, throw a few votes around and just sort of lurk in the chats.
All right. We have a question from MMD. So, Pally, what do you think of QST in its current form?
What do I think of QST in its current form? Oh, that's a difficult one. The board as a whole is a lot slower than TG. Since it's solely dedicated to questing, that means that you're going to have a lot of the old, the whole, what's the rule? Is it of any given medium, 90% of it is crap and 10% of it is kind of good.
Yeah.
So on TG, there is quite simply a fewer number of quests than there is on the front page or on the catalogue of QST at any given time. And so for the questing community, you might be clicking on, quite a few of those. Whereas now on QST, because there's so much more material, players can really zero in on what's really to their interest. They've got so much more choice, which is good for the players, but not so good for the QMs. I look in on some of these, and it's considered that sort of 2, 3, or 4 players is considered a good starting point for a new quest. Well, actually, that's about as many players as I had the first few times I ran Paladin of Joy, and everyone was telling me this quest is so unpopular, it's probably going to sort of crash and burn due to the very stupid things that Pally's done. Look at him and laugh. He's only got a few players, whereas now that's the new standard.
Yeah, and when I ran my quest for the first time on Anonkun, I got like 15 to 20 players throughout.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, because I really do like the questing format of originally it was TG, but now it's QST. I really did like that format. It was flawed in places, but there were a lot of really good quests that managed to thrive despite that, and especially draw quests, which I feel are sort of dying out now, which is really, really sad. It's really sad to see all of the questing from TG sort of just die. Like, I think the move to QST as a whole was really ill-advised and messed up. So MMD also asked, do you think it should be destroyed and moved to another place? I honestly think that QST is a graveyard and it needs either a big injection of new players, which is something I don't think it will get, or like it does need to be moved. So what do you think about moving it or destroying QST, or should it stay around?
Destroy it. There's nothing for it. Just axe the thing. It's over. I
Oof.
mean, Japanese moot won't do that, but at least not for I'd say another 18 months. Maybe after that he'll change his mind. But we're stuck with QST for a while now. For a while forward.
Yeah.
But really, it shouldn't. You know, honestly, no, it doesn't need to be axed. Now that I think about it, it's fine. QST existing isn't a problem, but TG shouldn't have Quest should not be banned off of TG. It makes kind of it functions having both. It's not a bad idea as such, because like you said, it's like you can have all of this variation on QST, while on TG you might run. You might have more players simply because there is more people coming through. And the thing is that when we had quests on TG as well, we had more players on QST because there was like people coming over to QST from TG consistently. But there is no connection there anymore. There's no reason for people to find QST from TG, or just to be reminded that QST exists in order to go there, like there used to be for a while.
One of the biggest criticisms against the whole QST system is that when quests were on TG and on D to a certain extent, you could just be browsing the board as you do normally. And let's say you really like demons, for example, and you see on the front page, oh, there's a quest, it's about demons, I might give this a shot. That's what sort of gets new questing players sort of into the system. But with QST, for anybody to sort of pick anything up, they already have to have a vested interest in quests. And yeah. Well, they could always, misclick poll. So, with that all said and done, then Pally, I've got just one final question for you, if you're still ready to chat.
Yep.
So, my question to you is, you've basically done a lot of quests on Anonkun, and you've written a ridiculous amount. How do you deal with sort of like fatigue? Like, advice to up and coming QMs, how do you sort of keep up the pace of writing on and on?
That's a very good question, and I would say lots and lots of caffeine, but that's only part of it. Basically, the long and the short of it is that long before I was running quests, I was running pen and paper games, and I found that when I played, I got bored because I wasn't the center of attention. But when I was running the game, I didn't get bored and I didn't get tired. And sometimes I didn't even notice when I was getting hungry and thirsty. And I could, after a sort of 5-6 hour session, or sometimes longer, I used to pull sort of 10-12 hour sessions regularly sometimes. I would actually sort of get up out of my chair and realize I have trouble standing because I haven't eaten in the last 12 hours and I've just been bouncing around in my seat, talking animatedly as I ran the game. So for me, questing is a very similar thing. It's a bit of an adrenaline rush in itself, a bit nerve-wracking sometimes. But for me, it's a case of I could just keep on going and going and going, but I have to carefully manage my time and say I'm only going to sort of set aside 5 hours for this or 6 hours for this. For new QMs, if you don't enjoy some aspect of questing, whether it be hammering it out, whether it be seeing people argue in the chat, whether you see people voting or telling you what a great job you've done, what a crap job you've done, or if you don't have a burning sort of story of some kind to tell people, then yeah, you are going to have difficulty motivating yourself and getting yourself to bang out an update every sort of 20-30 minutes, even if it's not a great update. You need to, on some level, you have to want to do it. There's not really any sort of surefire way that I know of that I can tell people, you know what, if you do X, Y, Z, it'll motivate you. You've got to enjoy just doing it.
All right.
So feed your inner attention whore is what you're saying here.
Yeah, pretty much.
Honestly, I do agree a lot with what he's saying. The reason people run quests is the same reason people shitpost. While on 4chan you get those delicious views, on Anonkun you get likes, you get follows, and they're the same drug just with a different name. Attention is the only reason people do it.
Well, I mean, the reason I do it is because I love stories and I want to write, but I feel myself procrastinating if I don't have something driving me forward. And that's why I started writing a quest, to have that push.
Yeah,
I don't think it is the attention in and of itself which appeals to me.
Well, no, because even to a certain extent, the attention is going to be what motivates you. The sort of other people joining in, giving you constructive criticism, sometimes just calling you complete shit. That's what's going to be keeping you going. It's being noticed that is what allows you to go forward as a QM, I feel. That's sort of what gives you the energy to keep going, even when you're writing some boring stuff that the players voted for without really reading. But, well, thank you for your insight on your quest, Pally. It's been great. So now we're going to have a quick chat about another QM's quests, actually. So if you have read them, Pally, or if you have any questions regarding them, feel free to chime in. But Spuds, today we're going to be focusing on Exalted Anon. So what do you know about him, Spuds?
I mean, I think I followed Dragon Blooded Adventures ever since it first started, and I've also read his other quest. Did he do two other quests? I don't remember. I think at least I've read what he's put out in general, not in its entirety, but I read all of Dragon Blooded Adventures because it's a quest which knows what it's a quest where the player base and the QM has sort of aligned on what they want to do, and they do it. It's very focused in it's very focused in its direction and the ideas it has, and it's fun. It's simple, it's fun. You know what you're getting when you step into it every time, and it's there. I mean, is it the best written quest? I mean, no, but there can only be one best written quest. It's like just because we aren't reading Twin here doesn't mean much. Like Exalted Anon's grammar is good enough, his language is good enough, and the direction of the story is fun.
Yeah. So generally speaking, I think he ran 2 quests total. I think it's the first part was just Dragon Blooded Quest split into 2 parts, and then the second was Witch Hunter Quest, both of which I think are still ongoing. Just Witch Hunter Quest runs sort of irregularly. He says there's 3 quests, but one's extremely short-lived. Now that we actually have you in chat, Exhaust Down, I have a quick question for you. So just reply in chat and I'll read it out. So, were you inspired in any way by any of the other Exalted quests running, or did you just like the system and wanted to run your own thing in it?
And dead silence.
Well,
yeah, man, he's typing.
Well, are we not going to answer the question for him and say clearly he looks up to me as his idol?
Hey man.
You can see if someone's typing in chat. He's not.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
And Pally, your
Maybe-
quests are good written, but I think the mantle for best written quest probably has to go to Hex's quest.
I
With the-
I think Twen is the best QM writing quality wise. And
Your tastes suck.
what is wrong with Quen when it comes to role writing quality? Who is better? Who has done a better written quest than SCQ or Last Companion or or Tax Quest? Who is better? Can you?
Well, he doesn't run much anymore, which is
He's dead.
yeah.
Well, I mean, he last we heard of him was that he was supposed to run December 2015, and then he never spoke again.
Yeah,
Yes.
wasn't that supposed to be the sexual encounter quest or something?
No.
Are we just ignoring Exalted Anon now?
I was going to get back to it. So Exalted Anon said he
he's
doesn't
posting
remember being
podcast.
inspired
I
by
thought
the other Exalted quests.
He was going to post in quest in general for some
which
reason.
is which is all right. Yeah, I mainly said that because there were a few. Yeah. Well, I was just taking advantage of the fact that he was here, but he said he doesn't, which is it's all right. The main reason I asked is because there is that other Exalted quest that started running again, the one just called Exalted Quest on QST. Also famous being the one QST quest remaining that has more than 5 players. So that came back recently. So apparently he wasn't inspired by it, which is good because Exalted is a really nice system. There are a lot of really creative things you can do in it. So Spuds, out of all of the characters in his Exalted quest, who's your favorite?
I guess. I mean, I liked Little Wave or whatever she's called, but it's Exalted is quite a flexible setting. Like from in the complete opposite direction of where Dragon Blooded Adventure has gone. There was a free shot quest back in the day I liked a lot called Princes of the Earth quest.
Yeah, Princes of the Earth quest.
Now, it's too bad that died on its third thread because it was well written and it had an interesting plot direction that was basically cooked up out of nowhere. But
Yeah.
it was all improvised.
Well, I do think that like with Exalted, it is very difficult, I think, to sort of run a story in that setting for a consistent period of time because it's very difficult to have character progression without also having ridiculous power creep, which is always an issue when you're running a quest, unless you just throw caution to the wind and let power creep do what it feels like. Anyway, so have you read his other quest, the Witch Hunter quest?
I read the first couple of threads, yeah.
Well, sessions.
Whatever. It's threads,
what do you think of it?
man. It's always going to be threads for Quest.
Yeah, so what do you think of it?
What did I think of it? Like, I've always had problems with these quests, which are about just collecting larger and larger harems for several reasons, which I've talked about before, but I can talk about it again. It reduces all the characters to almost one-offs. Like they have one big thing, which is how you interact with them, and then they're left into the background, and maybe one character which the people who read the quest really likes comes to the forefront, and they keep being a major character.
So like this is actually brought up as well in a game series I like, Fire Emblem. A lot of people complain because they think quite a few of the newer characters sort of just like based on one trope, one character trait, sort of one main defining feature, and the rest is sort of bland. Do you think that is that sort of what you feel for
No, it is that, and it's also that since it's also since that there is no space to develop the characters even if they weren't that to start with, you see so little of them eventually that they become that.
Mhm. Well, all things considered, I don't think it's does have decent mysteries. What with the actual physical manifestation of a goddess and crystals, etc. It does have some mysteries and some plot behind it. I do think at its core, it's one of the quests which is a lot more smut focused, because there are some quests which are, a big quest with the added bonus of smut, and some quests which are sort of like a porno movie, which is a series of smut scenes strung together with sometimes upgrades, sometimes just a plot. I think it's more one of those, so I can forgive it for the characters being sort of one note regardless.
Have you ever done a quest which is not like that? I can't actually remember a quest you done which wasn't like that, really.
So
Well, I guess Card Chronicles, which is mostly focused on the card battling. I guess that one is not like that, but the rest of your quests.
yeah, I mean, for the card one, like people asked for smut like for ages, and for a while I just didn't do it. But eventually I decided to have a smut scene, but I made them do it all in a card game, which that was a fun session for me. But yeah, I get what you mean. He runs. It's really weird though. The sort of quest is very different in style. But I do like them both. I understand you dislike the witch quest because it's sort of not your thing. So you're a lot more
Well,
focused on like story heavy
no,
quests.
it's not. It's not that I have a preference towards story-heavy quests necessarily. Well, it is, but I like games as well, and there's lots of things. And I'm not against smut. Mostly, what I'm against is harem. I don't care if it's a story-focused game. If the harem is too big of a focus in the quest, I can't read it, even if the smut is a very small part. It
Yeah.
just puts me off entirely.
I
And
guess that's sort of like why you have a much bigger preference for Exalted Quest, because the love interest, well, there's main waifu, but there's side pussy, etc. And they're definitely a lot more developed as characters and sort of given a lot of focus.
I mean, I think there is multiple love interests in that, but really there's only two. There's only
Yeah,
two who are of any significance when it comes to like romantic interests. The rest of the cast takes other roles primarily.
yeah.
With
So would you
Dragon
say
Blooded
that like,
Adventures, yeah, I
so
read it.
you keep up to date with the Exalted Quest
It's
running,
one of the
right?
quests I follow.
Yes. Oh, well, that's good. So if you had to give it a rating, sort of like 1 out of 10, if you had to sort of give it a sort of, just a quick once over, what would you rate it? What would you say is the best parts about it, and what would you say the worst parts about it are?
I'd say the best parts of it is its its consistent appeal, and it's the unified nature of its player base and what they want is the best part of
Yeah.
it. It's like people who are there, they all know what they're there for, and
There's seem like
and
there's not many arguments, etc.
it's there are arguments about strategy and so on, but people people are there because they want to, because of certain wish fulfillment, a specific kind of wish fulfillment, the wanting to, a certain kind of challenge that they're looking for, certain kind of relationships. It's people who are in that quest know what they are there for, and this means that, and what I like what that quest is about. So it isn't a mess. It, like many quests are. Many quests are one thing at one time and then another thing at another time, and characters have inconsistent characterization, because the main character especially, because people don't really know what they want.
Yeah.
It's the same reason why I appreciated Banished Quest, because even though there is constant shit posting and everybody is calling each other faggots, they're all there for the same thing, and they all know what everyone knows what the main character is and what the main character wants.
Yeah, I think Exalted Anon said it quite well. Sort of everybody who goes in the quest and reads and knows, they know what Senna wants, and it's, they want lesbian babies, they want components, and they want sorceress workings, which is sort of like very simple but sort of easy to follow goals, which I think really help the quest. So sort of out of 10, how would you rate it? Or is it something you can't really rate?
I missed that last part. Out of 10, what would I rate it?
Yeah.
I'd say it's... I actually dislike out of 10 systems, but I guess I'd say maybe a 7 or 8.
Ooh, 7 or 8.
Maybe a 6. Somewhere around there.
So we'll just say, for
on a completely arbitrary point system, I would give it a 72.
Wow, that's very arbitrary. So 72, sort of a very good quest. Not the most perfect quest to ever exist, but still a fun, enjoyable read. I think I can agree with that. What other quests you read that are sort of similar to it? So if there's anybody listening who might already read that quest, what other things would you say that are on, not even just on Anonkun, just quests you've read before that are similar?
I do think that there are some similarities between Banished. There's a difference in like quality of writing and tone, but there is a feeling about like how Banished was about showing off and being cool and getting more powerful and seeking out ways of getting more powerful, and how main character was kind of an asshole who wanted the same things that all the players wanted, which I think is quite similar to Dragon Blooded Adventures, even though the tone is overall quite different.
Well, speaking of Banished Quest, Soma recently announced that he's dropping the quest, if I'm not mistaken. I always had a lot of trouble getting into the quest. I think I read to the part where the person found like ruins infested with bandits, and I could never sort of get past it. So, as it is, would you recommend sort of somebody who's binging the archives, would you recommend that they still read it through, knowing that it sort of ends? Or, yes. Okay. So, all things considered, you like Exalted Anon's quests, you prefer the Exalted quest, and you think it's similar to Banished Quest. Fair enough. Well then, there's just one final segment, which is sort of just a thanks everybody for listening. It's been great hosting, and it's been great chatting to you, Pally, and it's been great chatting to you, Spuds. So hopefully, this podcast has helped people sort of understand more about different quests out there. Maybe they heard something they might want to pick up. Maybe they heard something similar to something they like, and they might want to give it a try. Yeah, so this is going to be the new format of the podcast in, hopefully with more hosts next time.
I actually have a suggestion for a change in the format.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I suggest we keep something from the old format, which was that at the end of the podcast, all the guests and the hosts say when their quest is going to run and what it's called, like their their nearest upcoming thread, when that's going to be, and what they're running.
Oh, well, that's completely fine. That sounds like a pretty good idea. So, if Pally's still here, Pally, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I have lots of quests that I'm going to run. I've put timers on most of them. The nearest one that's going to be running would be in about a week. assuming that I don't have to put it back anymore due to IRL stuff that's going on. And I'll also kind of use my final word just to advertise a Daughter of Wind and Earth, which is by.
Oh, we seem to be having some trouble there.
Sorry, I wasn't pressing my button on the microphone. I was going to say, just going to give a shout out to Trico, who I've just been reviewing his quest for him recently. Very good quest. I recommend people go and read it.
All right, that's pretty cool. Thank you for that, Pally. Spuds, would you like to say anything regarding your quest?
I'm running on Sunday. I think I've said it. I'm going to actually change the timer so that I'm thinking that on Sunday at 8 p.m. UTC, I'll be running Dogs of War. It's an isekai, as in another world quest, reincarnation quest, inspired by Remonster EX. So that was over on TG. I'm not sure. It still runs like once a month, but it's inspired by that, and also like war novels and war documentaries like Generation Kill or
Yeah.
Homage to Catalonia, which are about like how it feels, like the positive emotional aspects of being in a war zone is something I want to show in my quest.
All right.
But in general, it's a reincarnation quest played much straighter than most are.
All right. So it's on Sundays on
and I'll be
Anonkun,
running
right?
8 p.m. No, I'll be running 8 p.m. UTC, which EST would be, I think, like 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. I'm not entirely sure.
All right. And then, well, to cap things off, I run a lot of different quests. Some of them are very bad. Some of them are okay. The one I'm running next is Path of Ascendance, which is about dumb stuff and biosuits and whatnot. Give the first thing a try, see if it's your cup of tea. It'll be running tomorrow at about 7 p.m. UTC. So thank you very much for coming on, you two. And to everyone listening, we're always glad to have more guests and have more co-hosts. So if you do want to join the podcast, just give anybody in the Discord, just a quick @ or just message me, MZion, on Anonkun. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you for having me.
That's fine. Hopefully Podoff works with me doing the command instead of Spuds having to do the command again.